My mother called on a Wednesday morning, and by the time she hung up, I knew my son had stepped into the kind of mistake that does not stay small. My name is Grant Holloway. I am 60 years old, and I have spent most of my life dealing with damage after the moment everyone else stopped paying attention. I do not mean I am a handyman, though I have fixed enough doors and patched enough plaster in my time. I mean I am the man people call when a situation goes crooked, and pride has already made it worse. Families, estates, business partnerships, old resentments dressed up as practical concerns. I have been around it so long that I stopped calling it experience and started thinking of it as a burden I happen to carry better than most. That morning I was standing in my kitchen in Ames, Iowa, with a mug of coffee cooling by the sink and that familiar low hum in my chest, the one that tells me something is already broken and I am late to the room. It was Wednesday, 9:18 a.m., when my mother called. No greeting, no weather report, no comment about my posture, my cholesterol, or the fact that she still thinks men should not wear sneakers after 55 unless a physician has signed off on it. Just my name, plain and flat. Grant. I turned off the burner under the skillet and said, "What happened?" She did not answer that directly. Did Owen's celebration already happen? There it was. Owen is my grandson, 20 years old, just finished his first year at the University of Kansas. My son Daniel and his wife Marissa had been planning a big summer cookout for him at their place outside Overland Park. Daniel had mentioned it twice. Marissa had mentioned it 6 times, which is often how things work when someone wants credit in advance for hospitality not yet performed. I assumed I would get a call. I assumed my mother would too. My mother is 82 years old. Her name is Evelyn Holloway. She lives alone on Willow Creek Road in Independence, Missouri, in the house she and my father bought in 1971, and never once pretended was more modest than it needed to be. She taught Owen how to play gin rummy and once chased a possum off his bicycle with a broom while wearing church shoes and carrying sweet tea. She had earned an invitation to any gathering that used the word family. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I thought it was last weekend. Why?" "Nobody invited me." I set my mug down. "What?" "I called Owen to ask how it went," she said. "He went quiet. Then Marissa got on the line and laughed and said, 'Oh, Mrs. Holloway, that was Saturday. We just kept it very simple.'" Just like that, I felt something cold slide into place inside me. Not anger yet. Recognition. The kind that comes when a pattern reveals itself all at once. "She laughed?" I asked. Evelyn gave a small sound. "You know the sort." I knew exactly the sort. I called Daniel before I was off the phone with her. He answered too fast, which is almost always a confession. "Dad, why wasn't your grandmother at Owen's party?" Silence. The very specific silence of a man searching for a usable sentence and finding none. "It was mostly school friends," he said. "Some people from Marissa's side. Not really a whole family thing. She is 82 and lives 30 minutes away." I know. "No, Daniel. You do not." Then I heard a voice in the background. Marissa. Not the words, just the shape of them. Low. Pressed. Directing. I know my son's tells. I raised him. I know the sound of him making a decision and the sound of him surrendering one. What I heard in that silence was surrender. "We'll come by," he said quickly. "Tomorrow, maybe. We can explain in person." "Explain what?" "Dad, just tomorrow." He hung up before I could say anything else. That was when I called my mother back. "They're coming tomorrow," I told her. "Daniel and Marissa. They want to explain something in person." She made a small sound, not quite a laugh. "Mother," I said, "what are you not telling me?" There was a pause long enough to rearrange a life inside. "Connie Mercer was at that party." I leaned against the counter. "Connie from St. Mark's?" "Yes. She goes to Pilates with Marissa now. Lovely woman. Talks too much." That was true. She did not know I hadn't been invited, my mother said. Called me Sunday afternoon to tell me how lovely everything had been. Mentioned that a very polished young woman was there with a leather portfolio. I closed my eyes. A lawyer. That was my thought. I said nothing. Connie said everyone went inside for almost an hour, Evelyn continued. The younger people were left outside on the patio. When they came back out, Daniel looked like someone had told him bad news. Marissa looked like someone had gotten exactly what she wanted. I stood very still in my kitchen in Ames while the ceiling fan turned above me and the skillet on the stove cooled untouched. You think they're going after the house, I said. And the trust, she replied. My father built that trust before he died. Not flashy money. Never that. Land outside independence, conservative accounts, quiet, durable assets accumulated over decades of not showing off and not making foolish moves. The kind of money people forget exists until they start needing it. Evelyn had never discussed it much. It was simply there, like the house, like her. So constant people began treating both as if they had no will of their own. Have you known for a while? I asked. Long enough? I should have asked more. Instead, I said, I'm going to make some calls. I already did. There it was. That edge in her voice. Not fear, not outrage, composure. The kind of composure that belongs to a woman who has been underestimated her whole life and discovered early that other people's arrogance can be turned into useful material. Grant, she said, how do you suppose I knew to call you on a Wednesday morning? Then she hung up. I stood there looking at my reflection in the kitchen window and thought about my son, who I had raised to be steadier than this. I thought about Marissa, who had spent 12 years in this family saying exactly the right things, in exactly the right tone, while somehow making every room slightly more strategic when she entered it. I thought about Owen, whose college celebration had apparently doubled as cover for legal theater. And I thought about my mother on Willow Creek Road, 82 years old, sharper than most people half her age, already moving pieces I had not even seen on the board. I picked up my phone and sent a text to a man I had not contacted in nearly 2 years. Call me. Need you. Need. I did not yet know what my mother had already set in motion. I knew only this. By the time Daniel and Marissa arrived with their careful faces and polished explanations, they were going to find themselves in a room for which they had badly misjudged the dimensions. 7 days. That is how long they let it sit. 1 week of silence, broken only by a text from Daniel on Thursday morning. Still planning to come Friday, Dad. With a period, no warmth, no softness. The punctuation of a man editing himself while someone watched. I spent the week the way I always spend these situations. Quietly. I drove down to Independence on Monday afternoon and sat across from Evelyn at the kitchen table I had been eating at since the Nixon administration. She poured me decaf so weak it tasted like regret, and then told me everything. The morning after Connie Mercer's call, my mother had gotten dressed, driven herself downtown, parked in the municipal garage, and walked into the office of Rebecca Sloan, a state attorney, 3rd floor of the Fremont building on Main Street. You already knew Rebecca Sloan? I asked. She handled the Parkers' probate 2 years ago, my mother said. Margaret Parker was very impressed. I kept the card. Of course you did. I keep things, Grant. This is not new information. This is a woman who still has my 8th grade report card and the ticket stub from my first high school baseball game. No, it was not new information. So you just went in Monday morning? She does not work Sundays. She is an attorney, not a raccoon. I nodded because that, too, was fair. I told her what Connie had told me, Evelyn said. She asked several questions. Then she made several calls. What kind of calls? She stirred her coffee with excruciating calm. The kind that confirmed Daniel and Marissa had already consulted counsel. My hands went still around the mug. Who? A lawyer named Patrick Voss. Office in Lee's Summit. The kitchen seemed to change temperature around me. And what exactly had they consulted him about? My mother looked up from her coffee. Petitioning for a review of my competency. For a second, all I heard was the refrigerator motor and a dog barking somewhere down the block. Competency. Apparently, she said, I am no longer fully equipped to oversee my own financial affairs. She said it dryly, almost mildly. That made it worse. I leaned forward. Mother, you need to understand something. What they are trying to do is not only insulting. If it's handled badly, it is dangerous. Rebecca explained that very clearly. Good. She also explained, my mother went on, what I needed to do to ensure it failed. I waited. She smiled. It was the same smile she used to give me when I was 15 and trying to bluff my way through something obvious. We'll get to that, she said. Friday arrived with the slow pressure of weather you have already seen on radar for days. Daniel and Marissa pulled into my driveway in West Ames at 1:56 p.m. in Marissa's white Volvo SUV. Of course it was a Volvo. Something expensive enough to suggest taste, modest enough to suggest restraint, and practical enough to be used as a shield. I watched them from the front window before I opened the door. Daniel got out first. He looked tired. Not guilty exactly. Worse than that. Torn. Hollow around the eyes. The face of a man who has been arguing with himself for a week and lost every round. Marissa got out second and looked composed enough to host a fundraiser. Camel coat. Hair neat. Smile already in place. I opened the door before they could knock. Dad, Daniel said. He hugged me. It was real. I will give him that. My son has not entirely lost the ability to be sincere. That has always been the most painful part of him. He can still mean things even while standing in the wrong place. Marissa kissed my cheek. Grant, thank you for seeing us. Come in. I had made coffee. Because I am my mother's son, and because sometimes courtesy makes the trap cleaner. We sat at the kitchen table. Same table where Daniel did algebra. Same table where Owen used to sort trading cards. Same table where, 23 years ago, Marissa brought a pie the first time she came to dinner and won my ex-wife over in under 12 minutes. No one spoke for a moment. Then Daniel said, "We need to talk about Grandma." "All right," Marissa jumped in first. "We're worried about her." I nodded once. "In what way?" "She's 82, Marissa said smoothly. "She's alone in that big house. She's managing a significant estate by herself. And some of her recent choices—" "What recent choices?" She blinked. Only once. But I saw it. The pace had shifted too quickly for her. "Well," she said, "she made a very large donation to the church last year without consulting anyone. Of course it's her money, but when people get older, sometimes oversight becomes protection." "It is her money," I said. "She can donate it to the church or to the squirrels if she likes." "Dad," Daniel said quietly, "nobody is saying she can't make choices." "Then what are you saying?" He looked down. Marissa took the wheel again. "We're saying structure matters. Accountability matters. If there were a medical event or any cognitive decline, somebody should already be in position to help before things get messy." "Is that why you had a lawyer at Owen's party?" The room changed all at once. Daniel's face went white. Marissa did not lose her smile entirely. She was too disciplined for that. But it tightened around the edges. "Who told you that?" she asked. I ignored the question. "Was it Rebecca Sloan?" I said. "Main Street." "Third floor." Nothing. I kept going. "Or should I say Patrick Voss in Lee's Summit? Because Rebecca Sloan isn't your problem anymore." Daniel turned to Marissa. Fast. Alarmed. That was when I knew for certain he had not been fully briefed. "Dad," he said, "what are you talking about?" I looked at him for a long moment. "How much did you actually know, Daniel?" He did not answer. That was answer enough. Marissa leaned forward. Grant, this is getting emotional, and I think maybe— No, I said. What's emotional is using your son's college celebration as cover for a legal planning session to challenge an old woman's capacity. Her chin lifted half an inch. We were trying to protect family assets. From whom? From poor decisions. The way she said it. Clean. Professional. As if morality were just a budget line someone had to monitor. I turned to my son. She went to see Rebecca on Monday. Your grandmother. She got there before you even finished deciding how to frame this conversation. She has been evaluated, documented, advised, and protected. Whatever competency petition you thought was forming, it is dead. Daniel stared at me. Marissa said nothing. Rebecca filed updated estate documents Tuesday morning, I went on. I do not know the full contents because my mother believes her finances remain her own business. But I know enough. I know you are not touching her house. I know you are not touching the trust. I know that if you try to proceed anyway, the record you walk into will make you very sorry you did. For the first time, Marissa looked unsure. Not defeated, but genuinely unsure. Daniel spoke so quietly I almost missed it. I didn't know about the competency petition. That hurt, not because I doubted it, because I believed him. Marissa opened her mouth and he turned to her with a look that said he had just realized the room he thought he was entering had not, in fact, been fully described to him. I was going to tell you, she said. When? Silence. Then Daniel looked back at me. I'm sorry. I let the words hang there. I did not tell him it was all right. It was not. There's one more person in this, I said. Owen. He doesn't know what his party was used for. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. No. He will, Marissa said sharply. There is no reason to involve him. There was no reason to use him. That landed cleanly. I stood up. I think this visit is over. Marissa looked like she had at least 6 more polished arguments prepared. She used none of them. They left at 2:47 p.m. I watched the Volvo reverse down my driveway and disappear. Then I called my mother. How did it go? She asked immediately. About how you'd expect. Daniel? He didn't know everything. I thought as much. I leaned against the counter and rubbed my eyes. What exactly did you change? That sound again. That impossible, infuriating little note of amusement. I told you, Grant, a woman's finances are her own business. Mother. Sunday dinner, 4 o'clock, pot roast. Then she hung up. I stood there holding the phone and smiled despite myself. Sunday pot roast. That is how my mother chose to drop the ceiling on them. You need to understand something about Evelyn Holloway before the story ends. My mother has never once in my memory raised her voice in anger. She does not rant. She does not threaten. She does not storm. She arranges. She waits. She lets other people talk themselves into confidence and then removes the floor from beneath it with a napkin folded perfectly straight. When I pulled into Willow Creek Road at 3:52 Sunday afternoon, I noticed 2 things immediately. Daniel's dark sedan was already there. So was Owen's beat-up Civic with the KU sticker half peeled on the rear glass. My mother had invited Owen, and she had not told me. I sat in my truck for 10 full seconds and laughed once under my breath because of course she had. Of course she was not going to let the person used as camouflage remain the only one in the room without the truth. I walked in through the side door, as family always had, and found Daniel already at the table looking like a man awaiting a verdict. Owen sat beside him, long legs folded awkwardly, scrolling his phone with the beautiful carelessness only a 20-year-old can still manage. Marissa sat across from them both, back straight, expression composed, hands folded. My mother was at the stove. Hang up your coat, she said without turning. Dinner in 10. I obeyed. The meal itself was an astonishing performance of normalcy. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, homemade rolls, sweet tea in the good glasses. My mother asked Owen about classes, asked Daniel about work, complimented Marissa's sweater, which was such a deliberate move that even I admired it. It left Marissa uncertain whether she was being received or cited in. The answer, naturally, was both. Owen ate like every college boy eats, with enthusiasm and zero awareness that history is happening one place setting away. Then, when plates were half empty and the room had reached that deceptive ease people mistake for safety, my mother set down her fork, folded her napkin, and placed it beside her plate. That small movement changed the air in the room more effectively than any shouting ever could. "Owen," she said pleasantly, "I have something for you." He looked up. "Yeah?" She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and took out a cream envelope. She slid it across the table. He opened it. I watched his face move through surprise, disbelief, then something like sober understanding. "Grandma," he said, "this is a check." "It is. It's a huge check." "Your grandfather believed in education," she said. "So do I." He looked from the check to his father, then to Marissa, then back to my mother. "What is this for?" "It is the first funding deposit for an account already established in your name only. Rebecca Sloan handled it Tuesday. The money is earmarked for graduate school, a first home, or starting a business. Whatever future you build, you will build it with options." Marissa's fingers tightened around her water glass. "Owen," she said quickly, "you don't have to decide anything right now." "It's not a decision," my mother said gently. "It's done." Then she lifted her tea and took one small sip. "I should also mention," she said, "that I updated my estate documents this week." No one moved. "The property here, the trust your grandfather created, the investment accounts, all of it has been reorganized. Legally. Thoroughly. Rebecca assures me the structure is quite resistant to foolishness." Daniel closed his eyes. Marissa went still in that particular way polished people do when they can feel control leaving the room and do not yet know how much of it is salvageable. My mother went on. "I was also evaluated by Dr. Laura Kent on Tuesday morning. Full cognitive assessment, memory, reasoning, executive function. She described my results as exceptionally strong for any adult. Rebecca has that report on file, along with my revised directives." Then, very calmly, "Marissa, I know about Patrick Voss." The silence after that sentence had weight. Owen looked from his mother to his father. "What is she talking about?" No one answered him. "I know about the meeting at your party," my mother said. Owen's voice changed, lost its casualness. "What meeting?" Still no one answered. My mother turned to him with uncomplicated affection. "Ask your parents, sweetheart." What followed does not belong entirely to me, so I will not cheapen it by retelling every line. But I will tell you this. Owen was not as oblivious as he had seemed. He remembered the lawyer-shaped woman with the leather folio. He remembered being asked to keep the cousins outside because boring estate stuff was happening indoors. He remembered his mother's mood that day, sharpened and bright, and his father's face afterward. He had noticed. He simply had not yet known what he was noticing. When Daniel, pale and hollowed out, told him the truth, Owen did not shout. That was the remarkable part. He just looked at his mother with the sort of quiet that ends relationships more cleanly than rage ever can. "You used my party," Marissa tried. Of course she did. "We were trying to protect the family from—" "You used my party." He said it again in the exact same tone, as if repeating the fact might somehow make it less grotesque. She had nothing persuasive left. By 6:15, Daniel and Marissa were gone. Daniel looked 10 years older than he had when he arrived. Marissa looked like someone who had just discovered that strategy and superiority are not the same thing. Owen stayed. He sat at the kitchen table with my mother while I washed dishes, because apparently my role in every major family reckoning is still to be elbow deep in hot water while listening carefully. "I'm sorry they did that, Grandma," he said. My mother patted his hand. "Don't apologize for choices you didn't make." He nodded. "Are you okay?" "I am 82, she said. "I survived your grandfather's appendix bursting in 1989, the recession of 2008, and a kitchen remodel led by your Uncle Grant. I will survive this." He laughed despite himself. Then after a pause, he asked, "Did you really change everything because of this?" She answered honestly, "No. I changed everything because I finally accepted what needed protecting." That sat with him. When dinner was cleared and the leftovers packed away, he walked out with me to my truck. The evening had cooled. The cicadas were loud in the trees. Porch light behind us. Gravel underfoot. "She actually put that money in my name?" he asked. "She did." "Mom can't touch it?" "No." He looked back at the house, at the lit kitchen window where Evelyn's silhouette moved calmly through the last work of the evening. "She's incredible." "She always has been," I said. "We just keep making the mistake of thinking that because she is polite, she is harmless." He smiled faintly. Then the smile went away. "Is Dad going to be okay?" There was the boy who still loved his father. I looked at him carefully before answering. "Your father is not a bad man," I said. "He is a man who let himself be guided somewhere weak because it was easier than drawing a line. That can be repaired, but only if he tells the truth about what happened." "And Mom?" I slid my keys from my pocket and considered the question. "That," I said, "is above my salary." He laughed once. Then he nodded, hands in his hoodie pocket, looking older than he had that afternoon. I drove back to Ames that night with the radio low and the road mostly empty and the specific calm that comes only after watching justice do its work without raising its voice. It is not the satisfaction movies promise you. No slammed doors, no glass breaking, no final speech with thunder behind it, just clarity. A woman on Willow Creek Road who had been assessed as old, soft, manageable, and had answered with legal precision, a cognitive report, a restructured estate, and a roast dinner. People had looked at my mother and seen fragility. They saw a landline, an old house, a widow in cardigans. They did not see what I had spent 60 years watching up close. They did not see the steel. At 8:11, stopped at a light on Highway 69, I felt my phone buzz. A text from Evelyn. Dinner was nice. The rolls turned out well. I stared at it and laughed aloud in my truck like a crazy man. Then I typed back, "You took them apart with pot roast and sweet tea. Dad would have adored this." The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then her answer. He always did appreciate a proper Sunday. I set the phone down and drove on through the dark. And I thought about my father, who had built something real and left it in the hands of a woman he trusted completely. I thought about how Daniel and Marissa had looked at Evelyn and seen an old woman near the end of her life instead of the person who had survived every chapter before them and intended to survive this one too. That was the only mistake that ever mattered, and it was enough.